Seva is a Sanskrit word that describes the act of selfless service performed without any expectation of reward. This dedication to others, and specifically to our country, is what I'm sharing with you today, Veterans Day. Dan Justis is an Air Force veteran, wellness consultant, and yoga teacher. I'm honored to welcome him and eager for you to hear how his service in the Air Force led to yoga and to many more selfless acts of service. Let's get started. Welcome to the Youthful Older Yogi podcast. I'm MJ Waddell, your yogi host and founder of Share Yoga. I've been practicing, teaching, and loving yoga for over 25 years. I'm an advocate of movement, creativity, and staying healthy in mind and body after 50. And so are my guests. It's never too late to start, and there's a lot of healthy years ahead. So let's start now. Hi, everybody. I am so excited about today's podcast. I'm MJ Waddell from the Youthful Older Yogi, and today I have on as my special guest, Dan Justis. I just first and foremost, Dan, want to thank you for joining this podcast and agreeing to be a part of it. Dan is an Air Force veteran. So first I want to say thank you, Dan, for your service to our country and your dedication to our country and our freedom. I respect and honor you and all veterans past and present. So thank you very much for that. And since this interview will be released on Veterans Day, Dan, is there anything special that you would like civilians to keep in mind today?
Yeah, Veterans Day is always a time for reflection, certainly in regards to what it means to have served the country or to know somebody who served the country, or just to be aware that, service is an important part of our history and who we are as a country. What I would say to civilians, and I've been preaching this for a while, is that you should engage with veterans. Life in the military is a unique experience. That experience is part of what shapes our perspective on the world. It's a really unique vantage point for things like community, camaraderie, service, and certainly freedom that anyone could learn from. So if you find yourself talking to a veteran, don't be afraid to ask them about their service. You might want to allow them to dictate the pace of the conversation or where the conversation ends up going. That's a really smart way to engage in conversation with a veteran. I'd like to believe that at the very least, you will hear a cool story. But more than likely, it will help you see the world through a different lens. And hopefully by having that conversation, we're honoring and empowering that veteran and keeping their story alive. So I would say, engage with the veteran. Don't be afraid to go down the road of what their job was, when they served, did they deploy? Of course, allowing them to be really the guide and you as the sponge. The stories of veterans are incredibly important to our national identity. And it's likely that most people know or are connected to a veteran. So that concept in and of itself is probably rings true for most Americans. For me, it's all about keeping the story alive. What was that person's experience like? How can that help you? And what we need a lot more of is, how can it help them?
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know a lot of people do get uncomfortable. The standard is thank you for your service, because we don't really know what to say. But just that alone, engagement is everything. And my dad's from the 11th Airborne. He was a paratrooper, a medic. So he jumped out of planes and helped people, bandaged them up. So, which leads me to my next question. There's so much in your bio that is so interesting and important. So I'm going to start first with your primary position in the Air Force. I want to get this right. It was in the Aeromedical Evacuation pipeline. So please tell us about that and how that experience led you to yoga.
Oh man, that's a great question, and you said it correctly. The Aeromedical Evacuation pipeline, of course. So I primarily worked in the aeromedical staging facility. The pipeline really explains where people move from. So if you're injured in Iraq, the pipeline would take you first to Germany. So you would go to Landstuhl Air Force Base and you would be treated and cared for at Landstuhl. And then the next portion of that pipeline is you would come to me to the aeromedical staging facility at Andrews Air Force Base. This is right outside of DC. Mm-hmm. And we're primarily responsible for the transportation and the care of our service members returning home. At the time, when I served between 2006 and 2010, this was the height of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. So we saw missions every day, multiple missions a day. It could be anywhere from one person coming back to 50 to 60 people on a C5 or C-130 coming back with all different types of injuries. We saw every type of injury that you could imagine, from those who were ambulatory, meaning they're walking under their own care and their own power, to critically wounded patients who were on ventilators, critically wounded patients who had some sort of fixator device, which is pins around a joint, usually the knee, the ankle, sometimes the neck. And the fixator was the device that connected these pins. So, and in some cases, some of these people didn't end up living. One of the unique things that we did in the aeromedical staging facility was we coordinated transportation for family members. So you might imagine having to reach out to a family member of a wounded Marine or a wounded soldier and saying, hey, we need you to come to Andrews Air Force Base. We're coordinating travel. You're going to meet your son here. And most of the time when we did that, it was because we were concerned that they might not make it. We saw a lot of gunshot wounds, a lot of IED wounds. This ranged from small shrapnel that needed to be dislodged to the loss of a limb or multiple limbs. And I would just say, to see such horrific injuries to such young people, that will always be difficult to rationalize. That's the mental health challenge that I face on a daily basis. But I absolutely lived for those missions. I loved the moment. And in the moment, you aren't really thinking about any of the negative implications that are going to come down the road. It's something I'm still mostly quiet about, but the fact is, when I separated from the Air Force, it was something that I struggled with, and it's something that I still deal with. To get to the yoga part, I've been intrigued by movement and sport my entire life. It's very much how I participate in this wild ride of life that we're all on. And a mental health provider at the VA in San Francisco, California. And I just have to shout out the VA in San Francisco, because they did so much to try to help veterans who were leaving the service and trying to integrate back into a civilian life. But they suggested try yoga. They got to know me a little bit. They thought yoga might be a good pathway to help deal with some of these thoughts and concerns I was having about my mental health. And I quickly agreed to attend that yoga class. It was a yin yoga class, and I had no expectation of the class other than I'm going to stretch, which was something I wasn't doing enough of. Now I know that. But yeah, it was the experience in the aeromedical staging facility and really how it affected me after my time in the staging facility, not so much during, that led me to yoga.
And it's, well, you come from a place of service, obviously. And when you're in that moment, that's all you think about is, how can I serve? How can I help? It's the aftermath for so many providers, not just veterans. There's other caretakers, I think, that go through the same type of, how do you take care of yourself after seeing some very horrific injuries and possibly, people not making it. That's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. And in yoga, the Sanskrit word for service is seva. And it's selfless service, really translated, or dedication to others. And that's what I feel that you have provided, not only in the service, but as a human being. And now let's just come to the present. And you work as a wellness consultant for a company based in Rochester, New York. I'm also from Rochester. A lot of my guests are from Rochester because I taught yoga full time there for 5 years. So there's a lot of wellness blanks. There's wellness this. Well, what does a wellness consultant actually do?
That's a great question. It's a question that I get a lot, and I still don't know if I'm answering it sufficiently. So I'll do my very best to try to explain what I do as a wellness consultant. It's first probably important to understand who I work for. I work for a company called Smola Consulting. Smola Consulting, a great way to think about what we do is we're the State Farm agent for our clients, their companies, and the arrangement of their health plan benefits. So we work with all the carriers who provide health insurance to find them a health benefit arrangement and plan that is suitable for their employees. So that's what we do primarily. It really is a function of a lot of math and a lot of understanding the culture of these clients that we care so much about, and we want to do everything that we can to support. My boss, Steve Smola, just so happens to think wellness is an important piece of that, and I'm so glad that he does. So what I do is I go out and I meet and work with our clients' HR teams. And to give you kind of the ground up explanation of how it works is, imagine you're a company and you don't have a wellness program, but you're finding that wellness initiatives are important in the modern workforce, and you want to be able to provide these different types of wellness services to your employees, but you don't have an idea of how you might do that. That's where I come out and I walk our HR teams through best practices, doing focus groups with their employees, sending out employee well-being surveys to really get an idea of what their employees are looking for or need, getting a sense of the culture, asking them questions about the history of the company, understanding the core values at the company. What are the things that you guys stand on, and how can we pull those levers to promote wellness throughout the organization? So on one hand, I'm strategizing with the stakeholders and the HR teams and leadership at our organizations to help build a structure of wellness. The programs that we run could be any number of things. So whatever you like about wellness, maybe we run a program on the 8 limbs of yoga. Maybe we run a program that is all around mental and emotional resilience. These things are popular these days because of what we went through with COVID. What I love to do is I like to be with the employees. That really is that's my bread and butter, is to be with the employees, to get to know them, to have conversations with them. That's where I think that wellness can make the biggest difference, especially as a consultant, because you're an outsider coming in, is to get with the employees and get to know them and let them get to know you, be vulnerable in front of them. And one way that I do that is I host yoga class at our clients, and we do yoga together. And sometimes we share what the experience was like with one another. And, one thing leads to another. As we know with yoga, it teaches you a lot about yourself. And when I get a chance to practice yoga out at client groups, I'm reminded that this job is important. This job is valuable. In some ways, in the back of my mind, I want to share yoga. That's undeniable. I want to share yoga, but also I'm following the lead of the people at these organizations. I'm taking I'm listening to their HR teams and their leadership to learn about their history. So in no way do I think I overstep, but in the back of my mind, it's always important that we're teaching certain skills in yoga that are going to make your employees, that are going to empower your employees, that are going to make working at your organization and with those people a better experience overall. So on one hand, I help strategize and create the structure for the wellness program. And then on the flip side of that, out at the employer group teaching classes. And yoga isn't the only class I teach, but if I had to pick one, I would choose to teach yoga everywhere.
Well, you did a great job describing it. And obviously in today's workforce, it's much more than just the annual picnic, and which is a good thing. So it sounds like, and the name of my website and my company is Share Yoga. So I'm all about sharing yoga. And you're right, you have to listen, because sometimes when you say the word yoga, people will roll their eyes or walk away or whatever. Yoga is such a vast discipline. And so if you can, and sometimes without even knowing it, if you give a class just on, you may not even say meditation, you might just say calming, a calming class, and you teach people these techniques, and it does lead to self-inquiry. And I think that's where it's where yoga is so much more than a downward facing dog, which a lot of people think it is, and it really isn't. So it sounds like you love your job, which is great, and you're still in a place of service. So you're going to do both things that you love. That's fantastic. And do you feel your role as a wellness consultant, it's that you're educating the companies and the employees, and to enhance their culture or build on their culture, weaving in a few little yoga principles, and hopefully it leads towards a greater a unified workforce?
Wow, that's a really fantastic question. And it just made me think of, in this very moment, what did yoga teach you? What did yoga teach me? What does yoga do for every individual who walks through that door and says, I'm going to give this a try? I think the cool thing about yoga is that it gives you what you need. So in the workplace, if you draw from that, how can I support them through principles in yoga? Is you approach the topic. Maybe you host a class. Perhaps you're sitting down with the group and talking a little bit about what yoga is, and you try to find one or two things that they can benefit from. I think it's important as a yoga teacher to be receptive to those things. If I can find one or two things that are going to help you, then I can focus on those in a class. Yes, we can do all the poses. We can do a full asana sequence, but what is the real nugget that you want to leave with them? And I think yoga gives us a lot of different things to choose from. So I do think that I'm using my yoga practice, even if I'm not teaching a yoga class, but certainly when I'm teaching the yoga class, in the same way that yoga taught me what I needed from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like yoga. I like to say that yoga is a banquet or a big spread, and you can pick and choose what works for you. And you're right, there's always something that someone can find from yoga. And it doesn't have to be a pose or a posture. I'm so grateful to have a male perspective. You're our first male guest on the Youthful Older Yogi. And have you seen, in your experience, a greater openness towards yoga as far as men practicing? And because I know there's a lot of hesitancy sometimes, and you've worked with veterans, and you work with civilians and people that have never been touched by yoga, but do you feel like it's being more widely accepted by men? Because yoga is, the gurus are all males. So, and now here, so a lot of people don't know that women weren't even allowed to do yoga. It was all males. And so now it's predominantly women in this culture, in this day and age. So do you find there's a bit more openness now to yoga?
I do. I believe strongly that there is more of an openness to yoga for men. And the way you just described it, in our country, the image of yoga is the studio class. Maybe it's slightly heated, perhaps. There's a lot of women and very few men, or maybe no men at all. And this image of what yoga is in America, I believe, is changing. When you really pull back the curtain, there's many different communities of yogis. There's veterans who practice yoga for obvious reasons. I think it's why I'm sitting here today to talk about how yoga has impacted my life as a veteran, particularly in that it was my service that led me to yoga. But if you look deeper and really open your eyes, you're going to see these satellite yoga communities of all different types of people. As it relates to the people that I interact with related to yoga, the veteran community and men especially, I think when it comes from another male veteran, it's easy access. So I'm fortunate in that sense, in that I'm a veteran who found support and solace in a yoga practice, and in sharing that with other men who are also veterans, they're more receptive to the practice. So yeah, I think that there is this openness, and now we've been through the COVID-19 pandemic. It lingers, right? There's still people who are concerned about it, and should be, rightfully so. There are certainly, in the work that I do, organizations who are seeing the fallout, the mental and emotional health fallout of the pandemic. And it goes back even prior to the pandemic. We've seen these trends in depression and anxiety. And these are things that I get to look at on a pretty regular basis, is how are your employees dealing with stress and anxiety? And you won't be surprised to know that it's typically the number one claim and the number one chronic condition that an employee population is dealing with and managing. So if you step back and you look at, oh my gosh, there's all these people who are dealing with depression and anxiety in the workplace, in the veteran community, and in other communities around the world, you also got to know that there's people who are trying to help them. So one really great thing about being a veteran today is there are many programs out there that will support you with physical and mental health. You can find it. If you're somebody who is needing a positive coping mechanism because you're dealing with stress and anxiety, the workplace is a great place to go to find support. One really interesting comment that I'll make is that the number one trusted source for information, wherever you're going to get it, is the workplace. So if you're somebody who is, working at a job, wherever you are, it's likely that there's going to be some resource that might lead you to a yoga class or to principles of mindfulness, or maybe some guided meditations. These resources are out there, and I think becoming more widely accepted. There's a lot of research being done on the benefits of yoga and mindfulness, and these are being funneled into the workplaces and through people like me who are wellness consultants that are providing that information, that are giving out those resources. So we live in an age where you shouldn't be surprised that there's a community of people nearby, perhaps you're a part of it, who are practicing yoga for the mental health benefits at the very least. And then once you get into the practice and you start trying all the different types of yoga, and you're likely to stumble across something that suits you and who you are. And it evolves from there, as you know.
Yes, it's Yeah, I've been practicing almost 30 years. And obviously I was, 30 years younger. And it was really, and I was a professional dancer. And so yoga was like, oh my gosh, I can do all these poses. It's easy for me. I'm flexible. And that, but there's the thing that I loved about it was there was no judgment. There was no, it was just yours. And now, 30 years later, what I've gained from it is immense. I can't even, it's so hard to explain to people what it does for you. But I meditate every day. I practice every day. It doesn't mean I do a whole hour and a half every day, but I do some type of meditation and movement, usually asana, every single day. And I also wanted to say, Dan, your first class, if people don't know, you may be listening to this podcast and you're not familiar with yoga. His first class, it's called Yin Yoga. And Yin Yoga, you hold these poses. And it's really for, it gets deep into the tendons and the muscular connections and things. And it is not comfortable. It is meant to, yin practice is meant to, you hold these poses, and usually there's support, but sometimes you want to come out of it. It's uncomfortable. It's not painful, but it's uncomfortable. And you have to stay with your thoughts. You have to stay with your breath. You have to stay. So I admire you for returning to yoga after your first class was a yin class, because I've taught yin. And a lot of people, I'll say, okay, now we're going to, do butterfly pose. And they're like, oh, but afterwards they're like, ah. So that's, I'm glad you came back to it after yin.
You were probably imagining, oh my gosh, this is his first yoga class. He's doing a yin yoga class. It was a 75-minute yin yoga class. And I'll never forget leaving the class. When I left the class, I was just astonished at what in the world are these people doing? But also that there was so much more to what I just did. Other people were like enduring these passive poses, as you just explained, for 5 minutes, for 7 minutes, and they seemed so calm and at peace. My mind was going a million miles per hour, and I was quite uncomfortable mentally and physically. And I was wondering, how is it possible that these people are sitting in a straddle stretch at their physical edge without so much as a fidget? I felt powerless in that moment. But also, I knew that there was a pathway to surrendering to it all. Whew, I get emotional.
No, it is, and that's what happens when you hold these poses and you go deeper and you stay with it, and then things start to shift. A yin practice is and a lot of people don't do it every day. You do it maybe once or twice a week, and but it is yes, you stay with discomfort, and that can spill over into other areas of your life, where instead of you retreating from something and ignoring it or pushing it down, you actually face it. And so that's, what I get out of you. And also great, muscular, things, your hips are open. You're really getting into the tighter parts of your body that grip and hold. And so it is so if you're listening and you've never done yoga, maybe don't start with yin. Maybe start with a gentle yoga class. But
great advice.
Yeah, be prepared. If you go, your first class is yin, you might just want to run out of the room after the first pose. So,
MJ, I'll add to that. My first class was a yin yoga class, and I knew walking away that it was powerful. So, and especially if you're a male, and if you're a veteran, don't shy away from these classes. Let them be confronting, because they are, and there's a lot of opportunity to grow in those moments. And not to mention, most men aren't as flexible as most women, just biologically. We can say that. So if you get a chance to do a yin yoga class, you're getting a huge help in your elasticity of the tissue and the tendons in your body. And I always say, when people say to me, "Oh, I'm not flexible, I can't do yoga," that's the best reason to do it.
Oh, how many times have
So,
we heard that? We've heard that over and over and over and over again. That's the reason we do yoga, is to stay flexible, to keep our range of motion. I keep telling people it's not about flexibility, it's about maintaining, good spinal health and range of motion. And I'm in my 60s, Dan, you're in your 30s, and that's the huge benefit of yoga, is to maintain range of motion, healthy spine, healthy joints, because as you age, if that starts to deteriorate, so will your life. So,
and if you start practicing yin yoga now, whatever your age is, then you'll have a practice you can do for the rest of your life. So if for whatever reason you can't do power yoga, or the days of running and riding your bike are over, yin yoga is a really great practice for all ages and all phases of life, especially the aging population.
yes, and that's why I'm here, to share yoga. Let's talk about Vetoga. Is that how you pronounce it? Vet yoga?
Yep.
Vetoga. That's where you got certified as a yoga teacher. And I had no idea that this existed. So before I go to the next question, can you just tell about vet yoga and what that is?
For sure. I was at the time working at the Wounded Warrior Project as a health and wellness specialist. And it was a really great opportunity for me to start sharing yoga with veterans nationwide. But at the time, I didn't have my yoga teacher certification. And through some of the connections that I made at Wounded Warrior Project, it was a warrior who was attending my events. He said, "Have you ever heard of Vetoga?" His name was Manny. Manny, if you ever hear this, I love you, brother. And I love what you've done with yoga and all the things that you're doing in your life. He's a really important person to me because he was encouraging. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he said, "I got to get you in touch with Justin." Justin is the founder and principal teacher at Vetoga. And he started this little nonprofit company called Vetoga, where veterans, family members of veterans, and members of the veteran community could come get their yoga teacher certification at no cost. You can imagine that this is a barrier to a lot of veterans, especially veterans who are struggling, veterans who are reintegrating, perhaps veterans who are dealing with some injuries or other types of hardship. And to be able to provide a teacher training environment only for veterans, you could imagine some veterans are just not going to go to a yoga teacher training because they would be uncomfortable in that environment, or uncomfortable around the people in the group. That's just the fact of the matter. It can be sometimes difficult to bring this group together. There's a lot of different things there's a lot of different variables that make that challenging. So what Justin did is he created an environment where all veterans would be welcome, regardless of your disability or the hardships that you were facing or the challenges that you're currently going through. Not only is this an environment where all veterans can show up, it's a transformational experience, which I did not expect. I'm all gung-ho about getting my yoga teacher certification because it's my time to start leading some of these classes and sharing yoga directly with some of our community members. And you walk through those doors and you almost get a sense immediately that something special is going to happen here. You could imagine a group of 20 veterans all practicing yoga, all learning all the different yoga tenets, having discussions about yoga philosophy and applying it to their unique lives and experiences. The transformational quality of that group getting together is as profound as anything that I've experienced in my life. So we went, and they still do this. Vetoga hosts their intensive, so it's straight through every day, all day for 10 or 11 days. There's no take home homework until after you complete the program. Everything happens in real time, and you're learning and you're struggling through the teacher training together. They do it now in Southern California. But yeah, it's a transformational experience for everybody who walked through that door. I made friends for life, and I'm forever indebted to Justin for creating this program and creating an environment where veterans are welcome. Not only are the veterans themselves, their service dogs, whatever they need to get through the day are welcome there, but the stories are welcome. Mm-hmm. You can share and know that it's a safe space. And for veterans, that's really important. It's difficult sometimes for veterans to be vulnerable with what they've experienced. Mm-hmm. And the more traumatic, the more difficult it is to share those experiences. So in that room, we heard everything from how they were injured in combat to military sexual trauma, and the range of trauma that this group had experienced was so vast that you're learning so much. It's almost too much to handle emotionally in the moment, but when you walk away from it and with hindsight, you realize what a special time that was and how incredibly important it is for programs like Vetoga to exist. So I would encourage anybody who's listening that's a veteran, or anybody who's supporting the veteran community. Maybe you're a family member, a spouse, a child of a veteran. You could reach out to Vetoga, just search VETOGA, contact them, and Justin himself will reply to your email if there's a way for him to get you in the program. I'm not exactly sure what the process is today, but he found a way for me to get in, and I've had some friends go through the program and they've had similar experiences. I can't say enough good things about it. I got to cut myself off from talking about this program.
No, it's good. It's good. And we will, all the links will be in the show notes, and we'll get that information to people. And it's important work. And, as you were telling that, here as a soldier, or you sign up to be in the armed forces, just coming from a place of, I want to serve my country. And then you can come out of it with such trauma, and it shifts your whole life, your whole perspective, everything, dynamics about life, everything. And for you all to come together in a space that's safe, it's sacred to have that, and that this program that he has built and shared, it's wonderful. And I'm going to look into it myself, because I have worked with veterans, not specifically veterans, but I've had veterans come in and out of my classes, and it's always it feels like now I get to serve them. So it's great for everyone. It's a win-win. And before we had this interview, you had shared with me about an injury. We'd shared with each other about injuries, and how they can be very instrumental in self-discovery. And you shared a story with me about your recent injury. And if you're okay with sharing with our listeners about what happened and what realization you've come to through this injury, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, it's fresh, right? Because I'm still recovering from spine surgery. So for everyone listening and wondering, but I'll preface it with this. One of the things that I'm currently exploring is I'm a wellness professional. I've been doing this for more than a decade, and I'm the guy who needed back surgery because I had a herniated disc at L5S1. But that's a conversation for another day. I think I'm doing pretty well with it, all things considered. About a year and a half ago, I started to experience back pain. It was intermittent. It would last for a couple days at a time. It was painful in a way that would, make me limp for a day or certain positions, like sitting for any period of time, more than 20 or 30 minutes would cause, a pain, maybe a 4 out of 5, 4 or 5 out of 10. And then over the course of about 16 months, flare-ups were becoming more frequent and more painful until one Thursday, middle of the night, I woke up to go to the bathroom and I realized something was terribly wrong. It was very difficult to get to the bathroom. It was very difficult to go to the bathroom. And maybe this is too much information, but if it helps one person, then it'll have been worth it. I go back to bed. I have this concern, of, oh my gosh, my back is getting worse. Is this yet another flare up? And I kind of drift off to sleep, but wake up pretty shortly after, maybe an hour or 90 minutes later, and I'm frozen in pain. I couldn't look left to right without sharp shooting pain going down from my lower back down my left leg. And anybody who's listening who has had to deal with nerve pain, they understand how debilitating this can be. I went and saw a doctor. I realized pretty quickly I was going to need surgery. Then I had to wait 6 weeks for surgery. In that 6-week period, I only got worse. So that's the really horrific part of all this, is that an injury occurred and then the pain persisted and got worse over the course of 6 weeks. What I realized in dealing with severe pain consistently for 6 weeks is that it makes all the good stuff better. And it teaches us things that we wouldn't have otherwise known.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This has kind of shown up as a theme in my life, right? You have certain challenges in your childhood. You deal with certain challenges in the military, and then coming back into civilian life, and then finding your path and kind of staying on it. I don't say that because I feel sorry for myself. In fact, I'm so grateful for it all. It makes me think about some of the spiritual traditions that have prayers and rituals for hardship, like welcome the hardship, bring on the challenge. I am going to grow because of it. So during those 6 weeks, and then over the course of that year and a half where I was dealing with back pain, some of the best moments in my life. One example that I can give, and I'm going to try to do this without getting too emotional, is my son's second birthday party. It was 3 days after I had woken up and couldn't move, couldn't get out of bed. And one of the first thoughts that popped into my head is, how are we going to get ready for my son's second birthday party? Let alone, how am I going to show up to this birthday party? But, you bite down on your mouthpiece, you ask for help. Sorry.
Okay. Well, like I
And
said,
then
like I said, injuries lead to they suck. I'm not saying they're great. They suck, but what you learn from them, at the time, you're like, I don't need to freaking learn anything. This sucks. It's like, it's like, I've had enough lessons, God. Okay. I've gotten an A on every one of the freaking lessons you've sent me. Now you're going to send me this. So it's okay to be emotional about it. So go ahead. So how did you?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So, you ask for help, you bite down on your mouthpiece, and you try to find a way. And it was so cool. I'll just never forget all of my, I live in Rochester, where my wife and her family are from. So all of her family members showed up. My brother-in-laws, my sister-in-laws, they came over, they helped set up for the party. And it was outdoors. It was a beautiful day. I came downstairs to be a part of the party. Everything was set up and beautiful, and my son was smiling and happy, and I'm there with him singing happy birthday and enjoying myself at this party. After it's all said and done, I this is a difficult time on your family. If you can't do any of the housework, or if you can't help take care of the kids, who is doing all that work? My wife. I go up to her and I say, we can't forget this.
And you won't.
Yeah, so and we won't. And it's just a microcosm of it all, is that you get to see what you're made of. You get to feel the love and support of the people around you.
Well,
and you learn that you can endure through it all.
yes.
And those are the best lessons. And you have to be open and welcoming the hardship in order to get those lessons. So that's my takeaway. If something ever comes your way, that's really difficult. That's really challenging. And you might think the only thing I can do is give up, to endure, to be resilient, to try your best, because there's something there that's really beautiful behind it all.
And there's a lot more beauty waiting after the injury, and after,
Indeed.
So sounds like you have great support and a happy family, and that's wonderful. I just have one or two more questions and then we'll wrap it up. So you've had many titles. You've been a soldier, you've been a yoga teacher, wellness consultant, exercise specialist. I think you were a swim coach or instructor for a while. And of all these titles, and you're a father and a husband and a dad and all of that. So of all these titles, which one do you think has taught you the most? It doesn't have to be one, it could be several. And were you surprised at what it's taught you?
They're also connected. They require each other. So everything that I've done was because of the things that came before it. That's a really great question. If I had to choose one of those titles, I like these types of games, by the way. Pick one. You only get to pick one.
Okay.
I think it was the decision to serve my country. And the reason is it because it led to all of the other things. But maybe most importantly is the Air Force is where I felt belonging and camaraderie outside of my family unit, where you were in sync with the team. You felt the unconditionality of the support from your friends that you served with. And that will just stick with me forever. I'm looking for that always now. Mm-hmm. And that's a really big part of the work that I do. How do we create a culture of camaraderie and belonging? And my job boils down to helping people find that and create that. And I got to do a lot of really cool stuff in the Air Force. Most of my closest friends are from the Air Force. It would be hard not to put that in the number one spot for all those reasons.
And can I ask, this isn't something that I thought about asking before. What was it that led you to serve your country? Did you always want to serve? Was it something that you wanted to get? Did you want to fly planes? What was it that you said, oh, what was the day you said, I want to serve my country? Do you remember?
It's a mixed bag of a few different things. My papa, he was a communications operator during the Korean War, and that always seemed like a big deal to me as a kid, and it is. My sister joined the Air Force out of high school. She's 13 years older than me, so I had this big sister who was deploying to Saudi Arabia to serve in Desert Storm. And that was the coolest thing that anyone had ever done that I was able to see as a young person. My father, he also admired military and people of service, even though he didn't serve himself. He was handicapped most of his life, all of my life, and he never had an opportunity to serve. But he made it clear to me that, these people are ultimate professionals, and if this was a path you wanted to go down, there's opportunity there for you. And I was just inspired.
That's awesome.
Always inspired.
Yeah. Well, it's I'm sure well, I know you are a great service to your community now, and to your Air Force brothers and sisters, and to all the veterans. I just, I don't know you well, but I can tell they're very lucky that you are in all of these communities and building a community. And one last question before we go. I typically ask, this is called the Youthful Older Yogi. It doesn't mean you have to be older to listen to the podcast. We have youth on. And typically the question is for an older yogi or an older person, looking back at all that you've learned, what would you tell your former self? But I like to switch that question and ask people, knowing all that you know now and all the experiences that you've had and will have, what will you tell your future self? What would you like to tell your future self?
That's a great question, and I wish I had more time to think about, but let
No, I
me
know.
give it.
This is a question I don't give out, because I know it puts people on the spot, but it does make you, because usually the question is, oh, well, looking in hindsight, I would have told myself this or this. But now that we've had hindsight, we know what is it. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just it's a thoughtful, query about how do we want to see our future selves, I guess.
Yeah, I would say to my future self, don't be scared.
Great.
Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm trying to encourage people of my age bracket and older. Don't be scared. There's so many great years ahead. In my circles, some of my circles, they're, in their 60s, and they're like, oh, I'm getting old. I'm like, well, if you keep saying that, you're going to feel that. So let's switch it and go and stop saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, because of my age, because age is not a barrier. And are we scared? Yes, we're scared. We've been scared our whole lives. It doesn't make it, when you do anything, you're risking and you're a little scared. So that's a great, yes, don't be scared.
You make a great point, is that we're scared. There's fear. Life is the great unknown. And so you just don't know what it's going to throw your way. And I say it seriously, like, don't be afraid. Don't be scared. Don't worry. The pain will go away. The doors will open up. The light will come in. But in reality, it's easier said than done. So it's important that you start to learn some of the skills to help you through the challenging times in your life. So maybe what I would tell my former self is keep learning.
Yep.
Keep filling up the toolbox. Keep an open mind. Talk to people like yourself, MJ, and others who are on this journey, whatever that journey may be, because we have to learn how to make conscious choices during challenging times. We can't just do it on the spot. So you really got to fill up the toolbox with the skills and the techniques that are going to help you through the difficult times, so you can say, I'm going to go for it. I'm not scared anymore. So yoga is one of those ways. I think yoga is amazing in the different ways it addresses all the dynamics of your life through different practices, meditation, movement, pranayama. Breath work is becoming the next big thing. People are writing New York Times best-selling books about how to breathe, and the yogis have been doing it for 4,000 years. So keep learning the skills so that when the time comes and you face something that's difficult in your life, you'll have something to go to.
Yes, thank you. And Dan, I want to thank you again. This has been beyond wonderful. And I'm sure we've taught our listeners, not taught, but just about the importance of service to ourselves and to others. And again, all of Dan's information will be in the show notes. And if anyone is interested in learning about Vetoga, it'll be in the show notes. The Wounded Warrior Project, I'll put that link in as well. Now, Dan, are you teaching anywhere up in Rochester? Is there anywhere that you're teaching presently, or how people can connect with you if they want to?
the best way to contact me if somebody wanted to reach out and connect with me personally is through my Instagram. My Instagram is Dan of the Water. It's spelled the same way that it sounds. And I am currently, well, we talked about the injury and the surgery. I'm 7 weeks post-surgery. And prior to that, I was teaching at the Rochester Community Inclusive Rowing, which is a boathouse. It's a beautiful boathouse. They have they primarily teach rowing, but they have other fitness programs. One of those is yoga. They have a large veteran population, but they have other people from the community who go there for support. And, it's something that I believe in. I believe in getting people together, moving together, breathing together, and solving a problem, whether it's the pose that you're in or if you're rowing a boat down the Genesee River. So Rochester Community Inclusive Rowing, it's a really great community. If you're in Rochester, come out. The next event that I'm hosting is a fireside chat about trauma and stress at Rochester Community Inclusive Rowing. It is as it sounds. You're going to sit around a fire. We're going to, drink water or kombucha, and we're going to talk about how to be resilient to the challenges that we face in our life. And I still teach at many of our clients. So we go out and we do yoga classes. I just did a few yoga classes with one of our clients, Mary Carriola Children's Center.
Oh, yes.
It's a school for disabled children, and I got to work with their teachers and staff, and we did some guided meditation and some yoga, some yin yoga in there as well. So I continue to seek out opportunities to teach yoga, meditation, breath work, either together or as their own separate parts with all of our clients. And I'm excited about what the future holds at the Boathouse.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much. All the links will be in the show notes. Dan, I wish you the best. Happy Veterans Day. Again, thank you for your service and dedication to our country and to our freedom. And I'm just beyond the moon and so appreciative of you appearing on the Youthful Older Yogi.
Yeah, thank you so much, MJ. It's really amazing what you're doing, and it's an honor to be able to speak on behalf of the veteran population. And hopefully those who are listening, if you're a veteran, reach out. You can find me. I'd be happy to talk to you. So thank you, MJ, for spreading the word about veterans and about yoga and service. Obviously, this is something that I find incredibly important and valuable. So appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find me and subscribe for more youthful and healthy information on my website, shareyogawithmj.offeringtree.com. Or if you know how to navigate social media, find me on Facebook /Mary Jane Waddell. That's Jane with a Y, Jayne, and Instagram at Mary Jane Waddell. Remember, Jane with a Y. Now, this podcast would not be possible without my youthful older producer, editor, and creative friend, Andrea Canny. And you can find Andrea at Andrea Canny, that's CANNY.com. And of course, thanks to my generous guests who've shared their time and youthful wisdom. Remember, the Youthful Older Yogi podcast is presented solely for educational, inspirational, and entertainment purposes. It's not intended as a substitute for a physician or other qualified professionals. Okay, yogis, stay well and stay youthful.